All right, hello everybody. Welcome to comics class. I am Brandon Pallas, and today we're going to be working on gesture drawing, and then I'm going to give you a few tips for getting good poses for your characters. So I hope you're all ready to follow along. We're going to go ahead and jump right into some warm-ups. So those of you who were here last time may remember that we did the S curves and the C curves, and we're going to do the same thing again today because that's going to be especially important for our gesture drawing. So let's start with just some basic C curves. You can do them tight, like a letter C. You can do them long. So just get those going. Just different directions, different kind of curves. I'm going to go ahead and pull up anybody who's following along. There we go. So yeah, just some good C curves. And I want you guys to start thinking about the attitude of these lines. Like imagine if this were a character, like what would this line be saying? Maybe if it were kind of a dejected, sad kind of character, it would be kind of hanging, like, drooping like this. Or maybe if they're, at least if they were facing in this direction. Maybe if they were like a proud or like kind of enthusiastic character, they might be, standing kind of chest out like this. So just kind of think about that and just try to get some just some kind of attitude and a little bit of like storytelling into just this basic line. Think about maybe like lagging the curve at the beginning or kind of pushing it toward the end. These are all just C curves. There's so many kind of variations, but at the end of the day, it's just one short, it's just one curve, right? So just do a few more of those. Try to use a good like long movement of your arm and hand. You can like kind of carefully scratch it out like that, but it's probably not even going to look very good. It's going to get a little wobbly. And a big part of these warm-ups is I just want you to get confident and like authoritative with your lines. Look at these long ones here. These are C curves too, even though they're just like long, almost straight lines, but there's enough curve to say it's a C curve. All right. Now we'll go ahead and move on to S curves. Just like the letter S, it's kind of just a C curve back to back. We can do short ones, little tight ones, different directions. We can do these long ones. We can have kind of tight on one end and long on the other. Long and then get tight. That one's a little bit of a double. S curves are going to be one of your best friends in drawing. They're everywhere, and it's a very beautiful, very kind of elegant line. So let's just do a bunch of those. Here I'm doing some tight ones, more like a letter S. It's interesting how much easier it is to do the one that actually looks like the letter S than the opposite, because we have so much practice writing the letter S. It really kind of goes to point out how much of this is just training the muscle memory in your hand. So let's just do a bunch of those. And again, start thinking about the attitude. Start thinking about like what kind of emotion or action could be conveyed by these lines. Just do a few more. That one was bad. That's not even an S curve. I don't know what that is. You're gonna do bad lines sometimes. That's why we have erasers and undo buttons. It's fine. The more we do this, the better we're gonna get at it. the less we're going to make mistakes. We're always going to make mistakes. That's fine. Let's just do a few more of those. Take a look at what everybody else is doing. Looking good. All right, just a few more. Some nice long, elegant ones here. All right. So that ought to do it for the warm-ups. I'm going to go ahead and ask if anyone has any questions. Anything you might want to ask about warm-ups or S curves or C curves, the idea behind any of this?
No straight lines today?
No straight lines today. We're doing gestures and we want swoopy, curvy lines.
So yeah.
So we'll probably do, when we get into perspective and stuff, maybe we'll do some straight lines. And we'll do all kinds of stuff. We're going to have some warm-ups every time we do class, so we'll have a chance to get through a lot of different stuff. But for now, we're going to go ahead and jump into gesture drawing. Let me get rid of these so I can have a nice clean picture for the thumbnail. Or whatever. Okay, so gesture drawing is basically drawing often from a model or a reference photo, but also just out of your head, where the main focus is capturing the motion and energy of the pose. It's not necessarily like a literal representation of the figure. It's not necessarily a well, you know what? Let me just go ahead and start showing you. I'm going to pull up some of these reference photos that I've gathered, and let's see. Let's just go ahead and start up here. With this woman here. So the first thing we want to do with the gesture is we want to make one long line that kind of captures the overall thrust of the pose. This is a good pose for it because this woman has this strong kind of leaping pose where there's this nice long C curve that just runs through her whole body. And then she's got this kind of thrusting arm here, this thrusting arm here, her knees jutting out. So there's a lot of good stuff there. So I'm going to go ahead and just do a gesture drawing of this. So here we go. Let's get that long initial thrust. Got that arm here. Put in a little thing for the head. Another arm there. Push that torso out a little bit more. Leg there. A little bit of a S curve with the foot coming down. And that's a good just rough gesture. Let me go ahead. I'll do another one. Try to make it a little looser. Big swoopy line for the overall thrust of the figure. Put some shoulders in there this time. We can be very loose with how we approach this. We don't have to. We're not doing a mannequin here. We can, but we don't need to. We just need to get lines that kind of capture the overall feeling of the pose. So let's see here. Yeah. That one's okay. I'm not thrilled with that one, but it's all right. It'll work. Let's go ahead and go on to another one. Okay, this guy is a little less straightforward than she is because she, like I said, she has this strong through line to the whole pose. Whereas this guy, he's coming straight toward us, so we don't see as much of that arching kind of curve to the whole body. But let me see what I can get at this. Okay, it looks like we've kind of got an S curve here that runs from his head down through his hips and down through his leg. Got kind of another S curve that runs through the shoulder there. swoopy line for the other leg. And yeah, that seems like that's about what we're working with. So I'll go ahead, throw that first S curve, and we can just throw some loose lines in here. You know, like I said, we're not doing, this isn't a stick figure. This isn't a mannequin. These lines that we're making with these gesture drawings, they won't necessarily show up in our final figure if we're going to take this to completion. These may just be used as a guide. That's so good. That's not too bad. Okay. So just these like kind of loose, swoopy lines. For me, I've been using the mannequin that I taught last week for so long that it's almost like hard for me to get away from it. But let me try again. Like, okay, just swoopy, swoopy. Leg going back. Let's try. Let's do these arms separately rather than trying to have an S curve that kind of runs through everything. Actually, I like this one more. I feel like this one captures the pose better. Kind of just slash in some lines for the hand and stuff here. All right. That'll do for this guy. Let's see what else we got. Okay, here. Most of these figures are you know, nearly nude, so we get the lines of the body, but I wanted to throw in this guy because he's got this big costume on, but he's also got some pretty good through lines that we can see. Usually, you're going to get one strong line that runs from the head down through the body to the feet, or to a foot at least. Often it's the foot that's bearing most of the weight. Here, this foot is coming off the ground, so it's clearly not bearing weight, or not much. It looks like maybe it's still touching right around here. But to me, it looks like he's pushing off with his right foot, pushing off the ground and shifting his weight to his left foot. So we get this nice long S curve. C curve for the other leg there. Long C curve for this arm. Tighter C curve here. And yeah, that's a good breakdown of this one. So I'm going to go ahead and let's see. Here's that initial line of the body to the foot that's pushing off. This arm coming across. This arm is this. Head looking this way. Start to put in a little bit more mannequin-like details here, but that's not necessary. Like I said, that's, you know, how I tend to do it. When I'm just drawing, like I've done so much of this that I don't tend to do a gesture drawing. I kind of just go right into the pose, like building the mannequin. But if I find myself struggling and I find that I can't get the energy and motion in the pose that I'm looking for, I will often go back and actually do a gesture, do like some long swooping lines to really get that energy in the figure, and then go from there. So we got a question in the chat from Zypher. He says, how do you determine where to start with the gesture? Like starting with the head or legs first versus starting with the arms, etc. That's a really good question. And let's see. I will try to answer it. Let's try to answer it with this figure right here. I usually start with the head. To me, that seems easiest, but it's really a matter of personal preference for you. I would say it's probably best to start with just whatever is the most obvious line of action for you. And If you want to start with the feet, for instance, that might be good. Let me take a look at what I've got here and see if there's anything that where it seems like it would make a lot of sense to start with the arms. Okay, let's just jump over to this guy. Oops. Okay. Let's pop that to a new layer and get rid of it for now. This guy here, he's got a overall, arch. This could be an S curve, C curve, or it could be a little bit of an S curve, depending on how you want to conceptualize that, like tilt of the hips. And then the legs, since they're very bent, that's kind of going to be a separate curve. But this is one where, because his hands and arms are such an integral part of the pose, and they're kind of even bearing some weight here. I think they're both touching the ground. This would be a good one, actually, to start with the arms. That's probably not going to be that common, but say you're drawing a comic book panel or something, and you're only seeing the upper body. You might want to like put the arms in first, or whatever. So there are a lot of ways you can do it. There are no real rules. I'm just going to knock out some quick figures without reference, just kind of out of my head here, to show ways you might do it. This would be maybe like starting with the feet going up to the head. Some arms through there. Here's another one. Let's see. We'll do one that's arms. This is kind of like that last guy. We'll have kind of on their knees. We can do it really, really like loose and, not, let's see. I really want to impress upon you guys that, that gesture drawing, these lines don't have to stand for any specific part of the body. Like, if I did a gesture like this bit here and this bit here, this doesn't have to actually stand for the boundaries of the body. I could go in and then start, kind of building the body however I feel is appropriate. Just kind of using these lines as a guide, just as like I've broken down the overall action of the figure, and now I'm going to put it into a formalized structure that I know that I can work with more easily. We got a couple more questions. Zypher also says, how do you work with a reference that has a stiff pose without a clear line of action and such? That is difficult. You might want to just find a different reference if possible. But on the other hand, if the reference has a stiff pose, maybe you don't want a lot of energy and movement, in the figure. I think all of the references I chose here all have kind of a lot of movement. But there might be times when you want to emphasize that stiffness and rigidity. Maybe it's a very like formal kind of scene, or you have a character that's kind of projecting a lot of solid strength, and you're not going to have a lot of those swoopy lines. It's going to be a lot of straight lines and a lot of just kind of like heavy solidity, and that's fine too. I would say that what you want to do is figure out what you're trying to convey. What is the attitude of this figure? What is the emotion or action that's going on? And then you're just going to kind of push your lines in that direction. If it's a stiff pose, because that's the story that it tells, then emphasize the stiffness. Like make it, make your lines stiff, make it look rigid. But if it's a stiff pose just because the reference, maybe the camera caught it at a strange moment in the pose or something like that, where it's not really, or it's a weird angle, where maybe if we looked at it from one angle, we would see a lot of movement, but like this guy up here, like this is obviously a very athletic, like dynamic, movement that he's doing. And if we were to look at him from the side, we would see, let's see, if we were to look at it from the side, we would probably see like something like this, right? Like it would be a really dynamic kind of pose. But from the front here, it gets all kind of flattened out a bit. So in fact, I'll go ahead and do one more example here. You can just start to push, like I'll draw over. I'll use a red line and I'll draw over so we can see. If I wanted to really emphasize the movement on this, I would maybe bring that shoulder up, bring that hand up even more, bring that one kind of more down, swing this out a little bit more. You know, there's a lot of ways that you can do it, but just kind of exaggerate. Wherever there's a little bit of a swing or a curve to the line, you can turn it into like a lot of a swing. Another question from Crow. How can you tell which one should be a C or S curve? Plays like the torso is kind of iffy and hard to tell which is better or worse. That's going to be up to you. You're going to use your judgment. You're going to do a lot of these. I'm going to give you some homework to do some of these gesture drawings, but I encourage you to do these all the time. Do tons of them. Do hundreds, do thousands. They don't take long. It doesn't take long to just whip out 7 or 8 lines to define a figure and just, do a ton of them. Spend 10 minutes every day just doing some figure drawings or some gesture drawing. Just, spend 20 seconds on each one or something. And you will build up your ability to see what's happening and to kind of figure out how to emphasize the figures, the motion of the figure. Let's see. Things like the torso is kind of iffy and hard to tell which is better or worse. Yeah, I mean the torso. Let me see if I can find some good S-curve torsos here. A lot of C curves. Yeah. Let's see. You can do that. S-curve for the torso. I feel like you're going to see S-curves more like running throughout the whole body, like with the legs included. Because the torso is, it's just a spine with like a rib cage and hips. You're not going to see a lot of S-curves there because there's just kind of not enough room for it. You kind of got one piece down here and one piece up here, and they can kind of move against each other, and that tends to create more of a C curve kind of dynamic. Crow also says, also, I heard that S curves are relaxed and C curves are flexed. What's your take on it? Yeah, I'm not sure I would put it exactly like that, but I there's definitely something there. Certainly in these figures, you're going to notice that the more dynamic poses, let's go down to this guy right here. The more dynamic a pose is, the more likely you're just going to see that it has like a strong C curve because it'll have the whole body like bowing. Like, look at this. Whoosh, that's big old C, right? This one too. Whereas with more relaxed poses, man, I really got a lot of C curves here. I guess that's kind of a example there of that. I because it's gesture drawing, I picked dynamic poses, and most of them ended up being C curves. So you're going to see C curves in very dynamic poses where characters are really kind of stretched to an extreme when they're leaping or twisting or whatever. Whereas S curves are going to be more relaxed, like when someone's just kind of standing around. You're going to see those S curves. Okay. So let's see. Let me go back through and I'll do a few more of these. Let's get rid of some of this stuff. Let's go down here. let's see. This is kind of a tough one. I would say that this is a little bit of an S curve because her leg, because of the angle, it kind of starts to bow out a little bit. We wouldn't want to emphasize that too much, um, but a little bit. But you could call this a C curve or an S curve. Um, the other leg there, kind of a long. This is a nice S curve because of the hand sort of dipping down at the end there. Long S curve that runs through the shoulders. This, you could kind of conceptualize this either as I would probably call this an S curve, but you could also do a C curve. Sometimes it's going to be ambiguous and you're going to have to make a decision as an artist. Like, what do I want to do here? You know, especially in like cartooning, comics, stuff like that, we usually want to exaggerate the figure. If you try to copy a photo of a person exactly, it's going to look a little flat. It's not going to have a ton of life to it because drawings aren't life. You know, drawings are a interpretation of life. So we have to interpret. We have to bring our own sensibilities to it, our own interpretation. So let me go ahead and do another one with her. Just make it a long C curve. And I'm going to go ahead. Her torso here is, it doesn't have a strong bend either way, but I'm going to go ahead and like I was talking about interpretation, I'm going to go ahead and just give it more of a thrust to the left there. So there's her head, leg. Let's see. And this is another example of how the gesture drawing is not the same thing as a mannequin or a stick figure or whatever. Let's see. Okay, so I've got a little bit of a gesture pose here, and I'm going to show how. See, we've got this one line here, and then we've kind of got this other leg coming straight out of it. There's no like hips. So that's an example of where you might throw down some lines to get the gist of the pose, and then go over it and actually create kind of a workable mannequin from there. Okay. Yeah, that's probably good enough for that one. Let's do a few more. Probably won't get through all of these. Probably don't need to. Okay, this guy we started to break down. He's got, like I said, Crow. This could be an S curve, or it could be a C curve. This is one of those places where it's kind of up to you. The legs can be kind of a tight C curve. We can do the arms separately, or we could kind of wing them all together. I guess that's an S curve. It's a very tight S curve. I would probably handle these arms separately. So let's do this guy now. I like the way the head is hanging. I'm going to like kind of emphasize that. This looks like a kind of an anguished pose, almost like he's holding the body of a dead loved one or something. Let's see. Yeah. So that gives us about the basic gist of it with these rough, long, swoopy lines. I could then go in and sort of block this out, start building an actual usable mannequin. And none of these lines necessarily need to stand for anything in the mannequin. That's kind of a separate thing, but I'm just going to use them to guide me. Let's see. That kind of hanging down head. Alrighty, let's see. Let's try her over here. Bit of a C curve there. Not strong, you know, but it's there. So we'll pick that. Leg, C curve. Arms we could do an S curve, or we could kind of put the shoulders, and I think that's actually more accurate, is this arm has a bit of an S curve, C curve. So let's kind of break this one down. You can do as much or as little kind of building mass into the figure as you want here. This woman is a little bigger, so we might want to kind of build more mass into the gesture drawing rather than having like a more of a stick figure. But that's up to you. You're gonna find what works for you. That's pretty good. This is a good example here of you know, when I was talking about the attitude of your C curves and your S curves when we were doing the warm-ups. This is one where I feel like she's really got this. She's kind of got like a curled up golem kind of pose, and we can kind of see that in this like hunched attitude of this C curve that makes up most of the main gesture here. So let's see, let me break this down. Nice C curve through the whole body. It carries from the head through the torso, through the legs. Bring some legs here. The arms kind of, everything's kind of pinched inward, kind of hunched, and to me, this pose suggests fear or defensiveness. So let's go. Let's go ahead and get that long C curve with the body. I like how the shoulder is kind of curled in, like protecting. She's kind of punching her chin and her head down behind her shoulders here. Make the back push out a little bit more. Give it a real hunched kind of feeling. All right. Let's see. 12:36. Okay. All right, let's just go ahead and do this guy, and that'll be the end of it. Okay, let's see. This guy, he has a nice relaxed pose. He's not, this is maybe the only one that I got that has kind of a relaxed pose. And so you're going to see that S curve. As opposed to something like this that's just all big thrusting sort of C curve shapes. So here we've got this nice long S curve. And this is another good example of how these lines don't necessarily stand for like a stick figure like we would build with a mannequin, because we can see this S curve going from the head and pushing through the side of the torso here and then down through the leg. You know, we could maybe put another one here to kind of build that leg. Maybe a little S curve through the shoulders, maybe not. So let's just recreate this pose here. Yeah. Leg is going to go out that way. Other leg here. head. And then if we were to actually build this, we would, the spine would go through this way, but the sort of action of the pose runs around this way. Space there a little bit. And then, let's see. So I can see. This arm is a little ambiguous whether what we're dealing with is a C curve or it's like an S curve. That's fine. It's kind of up to us. All right. So yeah, that should do it for basic gestures. Does anybody have any questions? Anything in particular you would like to see? Anything like that?
So if you feel like your figures are just still too stiff, even if you're exaggerating these curves,
Mm-hmm.
like what sort of steps might you take to sort of solve that problem?
One thing that I haven't mentioned that is a great idea always when you're drawing figures is to just get up and act it out, uh, and just try to really feel with your body, um, what the pose feels like, what the energy of the pose is. That might help to if it's a pose that you can reasonably act out. You can try that. That might give you some insight on where you need to push it. Um, Other than that, I would say just just push a little more. Um, try different places in the body to kind of emphasize the curve, or the kind of thrust of the action. Um, yeah, just a little more exaggeration. Try different things. Um, let's see. I had something else I was going to say and I lost it. Maybe I'll get back to you on that. Um, okay.
Was it
What's that?
was it offsetting curves?
Um, I don't know, but that's a good idea. I mean, let's see. Let's talk about that. Um, you talking about this sort of a thing? Curve going
Yes.
one way, curve going another way, curves. Yeah, that's oh, you know what? That is what I was going to say. Not this specifically, but I was going to say when we get into design principles, which is, what I would call like offset curves like this. That falls under design principles. Um for so many things, just leaning on your understanding of basic design is going to kind of light the way for you. So if you've kind of tried exaggerating the movement, however you know how to do, and it's not quite working, you might want to just try applying your understanding of design to it, and seeing what you can come up with. That's something, as far as this class, that's something I'll talk about later. Uh, but if you have, I'm sure you have some understanding of design principles, and you can kind of try to bring those to bear, because you already mentioned opposed or interlocking curves. What was it?
I think that's what they're called. Or
Yeah.
I've seen something where it's like if you put two C curves right next to each other, almost nesting, they get kind of boring. But if you take one
Mm.
and move it down,
Yeah.
it adds some energy.
Yeah, exactly. That's actually something we're going to talk about in the next section. So let's go ahead and move on to posing. Um, so this is going to be a shorter section. There's not as much to talk about, or maybe there is, but I don't necessarily have as much to talk about right now. So let me pull up my notes real quick. Um, and here we'll talk about this is kind of going to be more like working on figures from your imagination when you have to invent the pose. Um, Although you can definitely use these principles to kind of edit a pose, if you're working from reference. You might find that there are certain things about the pose that don't work as well as they could, and you can just go ahead and change that. Um, so the first thing is a very basic principle of posing in art called contrapposto, which I'm not really sure about the etymology. Contra means against. I'm not sure what the posto means. Probably something like pose. But we'll go back to basic mannequin like we did last time. Make a little line for the figure, put the hips right in the middle. And what's opposed here is we want to oppose the shoulders against the hips. It's almost always going to look better when the line of the hips and the line of the shoulders kind of cross each other, or like the hip line is moving up, the shoulder line is moving down. I'll go ahead and fill this in a little bit just so we can get a little bit of idea. This often means we're going to have more weight on one leg. When the leg is locked out, bearing all the weight, that hip is going to be higher. The other hip's going to drop down, so we're going to get a little bit of like a curve as that knee is not locked out. And then the other shoulder is going to drop. So here's the arm hanging down. This arm is up. Maybe you might have a hand on a hip pose, or it could just hang down, but it won't hang down as far because this shoulder is lower. Let me show you how kind of weird it can be to not do the contrapposto. Like if this hip is high, and then we go ahead and we put the other shoulder high, like that becomes a really weird pose. Like there might be a reason you would use that pose, but like people don't stand this way, People stand this way all the time. People don't stand this way. So that's one example of contrapposto. Do just a little bit more. This goes in like, let me more than just a standing pose. Let me do like some kind of like a running pose or something. Shoulders, hips go in different directions. And this is not just for like high and low. This is also, let's say we had a pose where we're kind of like looking down in perspective. And we might have the shoulders turned this way, like one shoulder turned forward. And then on the other, at the hips, we'll have the hips turned the other way. So this is actually like when people walk, for instance, you're going to get the shoulders opposing the hips. So yeah, that's a perfect example actually. Walking or running, you always have the arms and the legs opposed, right? You don't put both arm and leg forward on one side and then arm and leg forward on the other side. They're always opposed. So keep that in mind. That'll help you get natural looking poses. Let's see. Okay, silhouette. Silhouette means what we would see. Let me see if I can do some quick surgery here. Yeah. Okay. Silhouette is just, what we would see if the figure was entirely blacked out and we didn't see any of this internal stuff. We can have all kinds of detail, anatomical detail or costume detail or whatever in here, but the silhouette is just the edges of the figure as we see it. And it's important to have a clear silhouette. We want to make sure that the pose reads as whatever it's supposed to be, even if we couldn't see any of the interior detail in here. So for example, let's say someone is standing with their arms crossed. Quick figure here. And if they're standing with their arms crossed, that looks fine. We can kind of, because we can see the details. But if we were to whoops, if we were to block all of that out, now we can't really see the arms crossing. We might be able to see, infer a little bit, but it's not immediately obvious. So in this case, what I might want to do is tilt the figure, or turn the figure to the side a little bit, so that now the arms crossing come out. This is not great, but it's good enough. And we can see the elbow here, and we can see maybe even like some fingers. And hopefully that reads a little better. This actually does, well, it does read a little better, I think. I would need to work some details there. But I think you get the idea. Let's see, do a little run pose. This is kind of going to go back to the guy we had running earlier, where he's running forward toward us, so it's kind of hard to see everything that's happening. And this is a perfect example. You might have a figure that looks like this, and if we fill that in, it's just not a great pose. But if we tilt it to the side a little bit, a lot of this is going to come down to just kind of choosing your angle carefully, or just changing the pose a bit, depending on what you're doing. So if this guy, the same guy, is running, now let's see. Now we've got a really clear silhouette. So that should make it real obvious that we have a run there. And then another thing that's kind of cool to do is, this depends a lot on what the character you're doing actually is, but if you're designing some kind of sci-fi or fantasy character or whatever, it's always a good idea to kind of have cool little stuff that kind of sticks out of the silhouette, that just kind of breaks it up, gives it interesting. This might be like boots, gloves, pouches, whatever. Stuff that just kind of gives interest to the silhouette. Let's see, Zyper had a question. How would you handle gestures for poses with a lot of foreshortening? Example, arm/leg going to the camera. Well, more or less the same. But, for instance, if a character, let's see, have a regular arm hanging down there, and then say the other arm is kind of pointing right at us, I'm assuming that Zypher's talking about for silhouettes rather than for gestures, although in both cases, for gesture, we're going to, if the arm is really foreshortened, we're not going to have a long line like this, but we might still have a short S curve, for instance, that we can work with. But if we're talking about silhouettes here, this is a perfect example of like this guy, he might be pointing at us like this. And that reads okay if we can see all the interior detail. But if we were to black it out, we would have no idea what was happening here. And this is not just for when the figure is actually blacked out or something. Like we tend to read the figure initially by looking at the outline. And different art forms, you know, different, you might have different intentions. But if we're doing comics, and I think this does go for most forms of art, you want it to read quickly. You want to be able to understand what you're looking at just at a glance. Um, and this is something I've noticed with a lot of comic artists who, you know, they might actually be very good at drawing. They might draw beautiful figures or something, but you can kind of tell that they aren't thinking about how the stuff is going to read, and you look at it and you're kind of puzzling it out for a couple of seconds when every time you go to a new panel, and it really ruins the flow of the reading. So it's very important to make sure your stuff reads at a glance. So for instance, this pose here, instead of, you know, we might have to cheat it a little bit. Instead of, let me just make a duplicate here. Instead of this, we might have to just change the angle so that we can have, you know, an arm, like a point that we can actually kind of see in the silhouette. Sometimes there's not a great solution. Maybe maybe we could lift it up like this. You know, we could change the angle like that. But yeah, you know, there's always compromises. Um, you're never going to be able. Sometimes you will be able to do everything perfectly, but most of the time, for various reasons, compositional reasons, or just what you have to fit in the panel, or for some reason it has to be exactly this angle, you're going to have to make compromises. So there will be times when you can't do everything perfectly how you wish you could, but we do our best. So let me take another look at, okay. So there's something called twinning, which means this is kind of like what Bren mentioned earlier about having two lines that are kind of nested against each other like this, and how it looks kind of boring. And it totally does. You know, we typically want to avoid this kind of repetition. Um, in fact, when we get to design principles, we're going to see that repetition is it can be a really powerful tool, but it can also be a big like pitfall. We want to avoid, especially with anything that's supposed to look naturalistic, we want to avoid repetition because repetition looks very artificial. So in the case of both of these, instead of having these two lines that are nested exactly like that, you know, we could offset them. We could change the angle so that there's a change in the kind of width between them. Um, we can have one that's more curved and one that's more straight, stuff like that. Ways to avoid twinning. But in posing, twinning would be like this, okay? Both legs exactly the same, both arms exactly the same. Or, you know, maybe the legs are different, the arms are the same. But we pretty much, we want to avoid having, let me see. We want to avoid having exactly the same pose on both sides. It just looks very artificial. Um, Instead, we want to find ways to vary it. Hope that makes sense. We're getting a little late here, so I'm gonna try to hurry this up. Let's see. So twinning, just when you pose your figures, try to make sure that the left side of the body and the right side of the body are doing things at least slightly differently. You don't have to exaggerate it. There are plenty of reasons why a person might be posing with left side, right side pretty symmetrical, but we want to try to inject a little bit of variation in there just to keep it looking lively. Um, Last couple of things. Um, think about where the weight is. Think about like this kind of ties back to gesture drawing. A lot of times that main line It's going to be going down to the foot that's bearing most of the weight. But people often will move around, and if you're moving at all, your weight is shifting. And if you're standing still, people rarely stand with their legs or with their weight like equally distributed over their feet. Usually, we're kind of like leaning more to one side. We have one foot that's kind of bearing most of the weight, another foot that's kind of, well, often maybe your heel will be up or something. So just think about the weight distribution and try to bring that into your pose in some way. Let's see. Okay, last thing. I might want to come back and do another class on posing later because I feel like I do have more to talk about. But a last thing is you want to use extremes of your poses. If we're doing comics, we have one panel usually. It's not animation. You don't have a whole bunch of drawings to convey an image. You have one to put as much information as possible. And then the next panel is probably going to be a completely different action. So what we want to do is pick the most extreme version of the pose. If a person's running, we want to have, big extreme action. We don't want to, if we're, not all the time. We don't always want to have super extreme action. But if we do have like a serious chase or whatever running scene, they're really booking it, we want to give an extreme pose to really make it look like that. We don't want to, even if this person is running their hardest, there's probably going to be poses in there that kind of just look like this, like when they're shifting from one step to the next. But this one doesn't look like a strong run at all. This is kind of a in-between pose. So we want to avoid that, if somebody's punching someone, we want a big old punch like this, This person is going, wow, getting blasted all the way back, Maybe some swoopy lines there. This person actually should probably be, I don't know, whatever. But we don't want to have like a little, let's see. If somebody's punching, we don't want to have like this, like a little dinky punch, we want it to be stretched out, wham, head going. These are pretty bad, but I think you probably get the idea. So let me take a quick look at my notes. Yeah, so that's about it. That should cover all of that. You want to use contrapposto, where the hips are opposed to the shoulders. That's going to give you a lot of life and a lot of kind of natural look to your posing. That you're going to do that constantly. Make sure the silhouette is strong. Make sure that that the pose reads if the even if all the interior detail were blacked out. Avoid twinning. Make sure that you're not duplicating motion on the left and right sides of the figures. Try to inject at least a little bit of variety there. It'll give it a lot of life and make it look more natural. Think about where the weight is. Which leg, for instance, is bearing more weight, or even if a character is maybe pitching forward or something, we want to think about is their weight too far forward? Are they falling? Or whatever. Just weight is an essential component of movement. And finally, make sure we're using the extremes of the poses. Don't do the weird little in-between bit. Don't do kind of halfway through the motion. Use the most extreme where the body is the most stretched out or the most crunched up or whatever it's going to be. So that should be about it for posing. Does anybody have any questions about that? Any thoughts? All right. Doesn't look like it. Well, guys, that's about an hour. So that will be it for the class. Homework for this week is going to be, I want you to give me 20 gesture drawings. They don't have to be detailed. They don't have to be beautiful. But you can spend 20 or 30 seconds on each one. Find yourself some reference. Please include the reference with your homework. Give me 20 of those. And then give me, in addition to that, give me 2 poses each that demonstrate each of these principles. I'm going to go ahead and write them right here. We're going to need, oops, that is huge. Contrapposto. We're going to need silhouettes. We're going to need extremes. And we're going to need to avoid twinning. And we're going to need to consider weight distribution. So give me 2 each of those and 20 gestures. And that will be your homework for this week. Hope this class was helpful to all of you guys. Next week, we're going to start in on the Simplified Anatomy. We're going to go through the body piece by piece and not go through every single muscle or anything, but we are going to go through the basics of how to draw each body part. So thank you very much for attending class, guys, and I will catch you all next week.
All right, thank you, Brandon.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye, guys.
See you.